I think that is it, and then we can talk about native plant signage. I think trustee Mishler has a little bit to share with that. We can go through the sustainability plan review beginning, and then if anybody has any questions remaining about item number 3, we'll do that, and then we'll move to our executive sessions. Is everybody agreeable with that? Is that okay?
Other item was going to executive session.
Right, I think there's 2.
But the public didn't know that.
Are they 2? Okay, do we do that at the same time? Just enter for both of those? Okay. So we'll do that last, and we'll enter for both of those items. Okay. So with that, item number 1, I'm going to start on the added agenda for this evening. Can I ask for a motion by the village board to authorize the clerk treasurer to pay the credit card balance of an initial amount not to exceed $15,000, subject to audit and authorization by the village board at their regularly scheduled July meeting?
So moved.
By trustee Wyckoff,
Second.
by trustee Banoski. And this, just in explanation, is because we're having to shift all these meetings around, and we want to make sure that our credit card gets paid in a timely manner.
And is this where we talk about the regularly scheduled meeting?
Well, we'll
Cover that?
we'll figure that at the
Okay.
end. So,
Are trustee Wiggott and trustee Bernowski, will they review that before it is paid, though? Because the schedule is then off as well, the reviewing of it.
how about if because you won't have it ready for,
I figured we'd do it the same like we do the health and dental. It says subject to audit and authorization at the next meeting. So they always look at the health and dental before the next meeting, and if there are any comments, we make an adjustment then.
so
I
before the
figured we do it
28th?
Yeah, do it the same way.
Before the 28th then? Okay, so when you are back,
So, right,
review
you're
it,
saying
and
before
we'll do that the 28th.
because normally it's the board meeting,
Right.
so not the 14th, but the 28th.
Correct.
Because
There's not a
no
14th.
Okay,
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a 14th.
okay.
So
I'm
you're
just
going to
making sure I'm,
do the auditing when you get back
Okay.
in advance of July 28th,
Okay.
that particular meeting, and that's where we will take care of the actual amounts.
sounds good.
Great.
All right, I think that's as clear as mud.
He just meant the difference between the work session, right? Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to do that at the work session. Okay.
Perfect.
Any other questions regarding that particular item? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous. And then that would take us to item 4, which we've moved to item number 2, a motion by the village board to authorize a block party on Fifth Avenue on June 25th, 2025, commencing at 3:30 p.m. Fifth Avenue shall be closed to through traffic between Galusha and Clifford Street. Property owners shall not be denied access to their real property. And it commences at 3:30 p.m. Do we need an end time on there?
7:30, we just got it.
Okay, 7:30 p.m., so I'm going to add that. And I'll just repeat that. A motion by the village board to authorize a block party on Fifth Avenue on June 25th, 2025, commencing at 3:30 p.m., ending at 7:30 p.m. Fifth Avenue shall be closed to through traffic between Galusha and Clifford. Property owners shall not be denied access to their real property. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved?
By trustee Banoski.
Second, trustee Briggs.
Great.
And this is in 2 days?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
as in
So
June 25th.
this must have
in
just
2
come in,
days.
right?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
asked if we could get it approved. They
Okay.
do it every year.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Wonderful. I love when they do this.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that one's done.
And a reminder, the Nelson Street one is on the 4th of July after the parade, and we were all invited.
Okay,
The board was invited.
sounds
to
good.
that.
All right, so that's going to take us back to the original item number 1, and that is native plant signage. And I think, Emily, you had some updates from your experience this weekend.
I do. So Color Fairport Green had an incredible event on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock right there in Canaley Park. They went ahead and did a native plant garden. They had several people sign up and volunteer to help actually get the seedlings in the ground. And the Color Fairport Green has a committee, a separate subcommittee called the Healthy Yards and Landscapes Committee that actually took this on. And I just want to kind of give recognition to the members of that Healthy Yards group. Nina Delapi, Andrew Hoffman, Ann Moss, Benita Archer, Jan Williams is the co-chair, and then Cheryl Williams is the other co-chair. So the idea there is it's a really great visible spot for our community members to promote native plantings. They work, native plantings obviously work really well with the wildlife in the area. They're well suited for weather patterns and the amount of rain and such, so that they're really good choices. Rather than planting some of these other species that don't really work well in our environment and require more watering and such, and aren't great pollinators. So the idea is to sort of educate kind of in this really high visible location. The other piece I think is the goal is that it's going to become sort of like a seed sharing, is from what I understand. That's kind of the end goal. And then there's been some layers that have been added to this with the idea of then adding some translation of the English wording or the English names of these plants to also the Seneca names. And so Cheryl has been wonderful. Cheryl Williams has been wonderful to work with, and Amber Bay, who's actually a member of the Mohawk Nation. She has connected us, both Cheryl and I, with someone who would be potentially able to translate these English words, these English names for us correctly. So we thought about using possibly AI, but I talked to Amber about that, and it's not a good idea to do that. There's lots of errors that can happen, especially with this. There's no way to check it. And I think there's a really beautiful exchange that happens there with Tanya, who's able to translate this for us. And it's really special that she's actually able to speak the Seneca language. As we know, this language has been stolen from the Seneca, and the fact that she's able to translate this is really a beautiful thing. So we are working with, her first name is Tanya, and we are working with her. There is a fee to the translation. And we haven't received the exact amounts on what the fee would be. So as soon as we get more information about that, I think we could move forward with the translation piece. So currently there's signs in the native gardens. The signs look great. They right now just represent the English translation, do not represent the Seneca, but hopefully those will be coming soon.
Okay. Can you bring back that information once you get a quote, just so we can discuss? I don't know if that's something that Color Fairport Green is planning to sponsor. We were looking at this and asked about this as maybe a first iteration to see how this goes.
Yeah, that was my thought. My thought was to collect the fee schedule and discuss it with the board, see what we're able to do or to support with, and possibly work maybe with Color Fairport Green to maybe share the cost of some sort or figure out something.
So maybe at our next work session, maybe you would have that.
I would think I
to
would have
discuss
it
that?
by then, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
Does anybody have questions about this? Looking at this end.
Just a question, but it's, in no way do I want to take away from what they did by planting this native garden. But did they ask? I mean, the village owns that land, so at some point
Yeah.
they did ask and get approval and.
Location, got it staked out, looked at it, talked about various locations.
Because I just didn't want to set a precedent that people are
Brian, can you
allowed
put your
to
mic on?
plant stuff.
No, I like the way you're thinking it, 100%. I'm sorry, there we go. Yeah, they did. We've been in conversation with them for quite some time on various locations when this was gonna happen and what they were planning
Like-
on doing.
Like since last fall?
Yeah, last fall, yeah, it's probably the last time we did it, but we've been in communication with Public Works leading up to this, making sure that the area was cleaned up, ready to go. When they were coming, we were aware of it. Yep.
Brian, was there discussion on who would maintain the garden?
Yes, like everything, you know, the group said they would maintain it and stuff, you know, but we, as a village, it was one of the conversations we'd had, you know, everyone says they maintain it, they have these projects, they sound good, but, you know, it's like anything, it's when the volunteers finally disperse or they go away or whatever, it becomes ours, right? So we're aware of that. I think with the location they picked and the size of the area, I don't think it's gonna be something that's too burdensome should we have to give some help or take over at some point. So I think it'll be okay.
I know Cheryl was working really hard over the last couple of days with the heat.
Oh, yeah.
Keeping the plants watered.
Sure.
Since planting them on Saturday, we've obviously been had scorching temperatures.
Yeah.
So, and there was also, WXXI did a really short article about the native species being planted in our village. So it's a nice little article.
Great. Anything else about that for right now? And then we'll plan to pick up
Continue
on
then,
a
yep.
little bit of a discussion next work session meeting.
Got it.
Okay. All right.
And I apologize. Can I mentioned
go
that
ahead.
the block party was on Nelson. It's not on Nelson, it's James. I'm staring at Dr. Brown and I said Nelson. That it's the block party that we were invited to. Don't show up at Nelson. It's at James. I apologize. I mean,
Crash 'em all,
maybe
okay?
Nelson wants us
It's
to.
always a good time to party. We can make it happen.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So that's going to take us to the second item on the agenda of the original agenda, which is a sustainability plan review. And what I was going to do to lead this discussion is talk about some setting some expectations about how we'll walk through this. I think everybody got a copy of, Xandra, I don't think you have a copy, but they got a copy of the original sustainability plan from August 2010.
It's in the agenda though, and he has.
Yeah.
I did forward the agenda to
Yeah.
him.
Okay.
Oh, he doesn't have his computer though.
We'll get you,
Okay.
we'll get you something so that you have it for the, because this is going to be more than one discussion.
I do have it on my phone right now. so-
Okay, great. So what, we have the original sustainability plan that was written in August of 2010. And then there's a 2010 sustainability plan status update that's dated August 11th, 2022, which goes through some of the items that were goals and some actions that were taken. And then we have a third document, which is the executive summary and sustainability plan update that was created from 2022-2023 Sustainability Committee. So what I'd like to ask the board's consideration to do is to help everybody. I've read through a lot of this, all three of them, and what I'd like to do is go back to the original plan and just take a look at the format and how it was set up. I don't know if anybody, if you've all had time to review through this, but I think it would be helpful if we looked at that plan as the framework for how we consider all the other things moving forward, and it'll fall into place. And as I read through the documents, I saw, as we get to the last document, there are going to be some items that are included that may not be within the scope of what we can do as a village, but I also saw some items that I know we are working on as a board that I thought that we as a group could definitely add to this plan. So my goal is to first go through these plans and put them in a format that we can go through and start to review them again, where everything, one builds on the other and the information is in one package. And then from there, the discussion would be a follow-on to determine what the next steps are. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So we're gonna, and we will not make it through the whole thing tonight. I'm gonna try and keep this to a logical amount of time so that we're not going on for over an hour. I'm gonna try and keep it to about 35 minutes just for this first initial review, and then we can come back with more information next month. So if you take a look at the Village of Fairport, the original sustainability plan, this was written in August 2010, and it was a group of individuals that were, they're listed on page 2, which some of them were elected members of the board, some of them were on different zoning boards. There's a member of the Department of Public Works, planning boards, somebody from Cal from OSED. There were a variety of voices that were in there, including the youth resident. So this group of people came together. They went through and helped create this document with the help of Matt Ingalls and Ingalls Design. So there's a framework that talks about definitions about what is sustainability. It gives some of the background. It goes through a series of goals. And as I started to read through this, I really likened it to some of our comprehensive plan, that there are goals that are outlined through the comprehensive plan that some of them are easily obtainable items under each goal. Some of those are, maybe we could do this. Some of them are things that we can utilize as planks for how we do business, how we consider projects, how we consider capital planning for the village. So the first section was energy. So goal 1 is energy. There's some accomplishments. And what was interesting as I was reading through this is some of the goals from 2010 are very different than where we are in 2025. I think one in particular was trying to help people gradually move to using natural gas in village facilities, which I think the direction of the world has changed away from use of natural gas and looking towards electricity. So it was an interesting read through there. But goal 1 section is energy. And goal 2 was pure procurement. And while I think that the world has changed also with regard to procurement, I think that this segment was left out in the update that was done. But I think it's an underlying principle that we need to continually have available to recognize that we're trying to use resources as local as possible, and maybe it doesn't have a whole series of action steps, but I think that it's important to continue to talk about under procurement what we value as a village for sustainability. Goal 3 was green cleaning. And again, I think that was revolutionary in 2010, not so revolutionary in 2025. But again, it's a policy decision on the types of cleaning that you do and, discourage the use. This is an interesting one to me. Item 3.1 action step, discourage the use of disposable plastic water bottles in village facilities. Well, actually, since this was done, we moved away from plastic water bottles. We moved away from the jugs of water that we used to purchase, and we now have water fill stations. So just even looking at that, that's a change in there. Goal number 4 was sustainable building and development. And so there's a whole series there. And that's where, I think that's the first segment other than, the first goal was energy, I think. Yeah, so when you go to the update, I think that's the first place, other than energy, that it starts to cross over, was under building and development. So that's where that links up with that goal, sustainable building and development. So that would fall underneath this heading. Goal number 5 is land management. And there's a section in the new document, number 5, land manage. So they're just in different orders. And I think that they're looking through this and looking through both documents. There's some items about land management that we could actually add in here based on what we've been working on as a board over the last year or so with some capital planning items. So land management, water conservation is number 6. Is that 6 in here? No. No, communication is 6 in the, water conservation is 7. So I want to get these aligned so that we're following so we can follow back and forth between the documents. Let's go to the next one, which is recycling. And I think in the new document, it's recycling and composting, which is number 3. So putting those underneath the same heading. Goal 9, environmental toxins. Goal 10 is communications, which is in the new document. And then there was community action steps. So that was the first thing that, as I was looking through, to me, it's helpful to align what's been done with also the new guide, and anything that's not falling under those original numbers, we would add in at the end. I think that's it right there. So that was the first step that, and I am happy to take both documents and kind of build them together. What each chapter consists of is talking about the goal and then accomplishments, things that have been done, and then action steps. And I think what's going to have to happen is we're going to need to go through the new report and go through the action steps underneath the goals. And some are going to fit and some are not. And I'll give you an example. Like under building and development, as part of zoning and code changes, the village can require all new construction to comply with net zero. So this is on under building and development number 2 in the new document. And I'm just using this as an example. So as part of zoning and code changes, the village can require all new construction to comply with net zero or passive house requirements. Net zero requires the use of all renewable energy resources, while passive house still allows, and it goes through to explain it. I don't think it's under the scope of what we can do from a village code. Brian, am I on base there?
I'm not sure how you can limit what happens in a private sector home. John, can you speak to that at all? I mean, there's certain standards in
So
which you
this
can
is what I'm
but yeah.
explaining, is that we're going to have to go through this and find out, is it in the scope of control that we have as a village, or is it outside the scope?
Right, yeah, so there are guidelines and parameters that you can establish for new construction, new projects, but commercial, industrial, residential, they all have varying standards under the applicable codes that I'm not entirely familiar with, and so I would suggest, consistent with what you're indicating, we're gonna have to drill down deeper and try to determine what's aspirational versus what's mandatory, because a lot of communities will have aspirational goals for certain projects. You shall work towards, net zero, while others, may mandate it for certain specific projects depending on what, comes before a board.
So I think that explanation right there is going to be how we have to look at some of these. Are they aspirational, that it would be really nice if this would happen, but we don't necessarily have the span of control to make or ask people to do this. But if they choose to do it, it's great. But there are other things that, like, will definitely be within the control that we have. especially like, like I was looking at the recycling composting segment, and we have talked many times about how do
The
we
new document.
in the new document, and it's this is going to require more sitting down and putting it into one document so that we can actually go through section by section. I'm just trying to give an overview right now, but like looking at that new document, something that we've talked about from a capital planning perspective is how do we find grants or money to get people toters for their recycling? And because today, just as it states in the document, people's recycling ends up all over the street every time it's a windy day that their recycling goes out. So is there some way that we as a village that we could work towards getting grants or some kind of funding to help with that? Or is that something that is aspirational and we try and we may get it or may not? So I know I feel like I'm going nowhere with this discussion. Is this making sense that it's going to take more than just sitting down tonight and looking through it? That I think this was the first glance at all these documents, that they really need to be formatted a little bit different together. Does anybody have any comments or feedback? Heidi, do you have something?
Yes, I agree. It is hard to synthesize all of the new and the old and the updates. If there's a way to see it all together, that would help. But otherwise, I feel like we're probably just going to have going through section by section and
Go
going
one step
through
at
it.
Just take a section at a time and start drilling down on it and allow the conversation to materialize, and that's the way to go about it.
I spent most of my time reviewing the most updated document. And I agree with Brian. I think maybe it would just be helpful to take just one section at a time, preferably. I mean, they started with energy. It's a big one. Maybe we could bite off just energy or a couple of them tonight in terms of how we.
I would want to put them all together in one format and then sit down and say, okay, at our next meeting, we're going to cover energy and one other one. I think that tonight with 3 documents that we're trying to look back and forth and determine, it might be more advantageous and a better use of our time if we have them in more of a combined way. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Is it enough to say that this most updated is really quite synthesized to begin with? I got the impression that it was quite synthesized from the old with the new recommendations. I didn't spend my time looking at the one from 2010 because it's so ancient.
I think there's a value to what's in that document. Some things are not of value, but there's a value in both places.
I would agree.
Value in both places. Okay.
I definitely started in the beginning.
Okay.
I went through that whole document.
And I jumped to
Then this
current.
document, because they build on each other and intent originally and where it goes. So
Okay.
I found value in definitely starting in the
From
beginning.
Okay.
I know you both have looked through it as well. Do you think that that's a logical plan to take a segment, put it together between all 3, and then go through it from start to finish and plan maybe 2 segments at our next meeting? 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think that works
I'm
because,
trying to do it in bite-sized chunks so that we are not trying to do it all at once is a little bit overwhelming.
no, I think it's good to look at what was established in the past, what's established now, and also, within the document, it does talk about, within the updated document, it does talk about some of the progress that has been made, bringing it up to this point. That being said, there are a few things in the 2010 one, such as procurement.
Sure.
It might be one of those things where, we've made progress as a village when it comes to procurement, and some of the, some of the other ones like the environmental toxins from the 2010 report. it may sound like a small thing, but making sure that maybe there are some things that are worth baking into this to say, hey, we've done good progress on it. We should keep doing this so that we don't lose our eye on that. So, I know, for example, some of the things that you talked about before, we're not using water bottles. We should continue to not use water bottles, just to make sure that I guess for lack of a better term, institutional knowledge is not lost, and we have some continuity through that. So I think there is some value to putting that in there, and then maybe there's a way to, Brian, when they shared the 2010 version here, do we have a way to manipulate the charts at the end so that we could even? I don't know. I'm just thinking like what
So
ways how can we prioritize some of these things?
It's a
too?
PDF. I downloaded it in Word. That's how I manipulated the first document. Will it look a little weird? But we can recreate any of this stuff if you'd like. It's not a problem. Tell us what you want, how you want it, and we can do it.
Okay, because I'm thinking down the road as we're talking about some of these other village goals that are identified in the new report from the committee. Also being able to say, okay, what is us, making sure we can identify the low-hanging fruit. Let's just do this right now, and other things that maybe that we need to plan further out for.
Yep.
That might be helpful as well.
I felt like in the energy section, the goals that were being recommended were realistic goals. The daylight harvesting just makes perfect sense. Education on using those rebates, and getting all of our residents to be more aware of those rebates, is something that I completely agree that would be a great goal for us to support.
They're aware. We're $100,000 in the arrears right now. We have been for the last 2 years. We give out more rebates than we can afford, so we're using the IEP program as a bank.
Okay.
And they keep paying for them through the company in an effort to keep up. I know we're going down the rabbit hole, we don't need to, but in April.
There may be some other things in there that we need to
April,
consider.
Our IEP program, our rebate program doubled. So it was about $450,000, especially when this was done. It's closer to $900,000 now. That just went into effect, I think, April, May timeframe. So there's more money to do it because obviously things cost more today than not. When it comes to like heat pumps and stuff, our rebates weren't moving the needle for the cost of those as they are today and so forth. So,
while I think that's really good, and I agree with you, I think that,
Well,
We'll get into that
but we
another
need
day.
to make sure that we have all the details, like,
Sure. I guess I was, these are, I'm seeing the Sustainability Board as a group of folks who want to help guide us as a board and offer suggestions. They have a knowledge base that they want to share, and the goals that they're suggesting in each one of these different categories. I guess I was looking at as, are these goals, how do we feel about these goals that they're suggesting? These are the recommendations that are coming at us, and
that's where
That's
we
where we're
need to
gonna
sit
talk
down and go
about it
through
next time.
each category.
Yeah.
okay, I guess I just want to jump in.
It's
yeah.
it's a great idea,
Okay.
but there's also details like making sure that we have, like,
Right.
do we have enough funding to continue to promote the program, or what's the stance that we should take at this point in time? Or, I think, was geothermal under energy, or was it under a different one? It was under energy. So, I don't know that much about it.
Well, I guess,
However,
just even having the conversation about the rebates being, people putting, trying to get the rebates. I didn't know that was, so this is good. This is good information that is happening.
So this is what I'm recommending, is that we pick 3 categories, 2 or 3 categories, and at our next meeting, we'll start with those 3 categories. We'll make sure that all the pertinent information is gathered together. And if you want to do, if we go back to the original framework and choose category 1, which was energy, and 2, I think, was procurement, and 3 was
Green.
green.
Gleaning.
2 and 3 are not going to have a lot of meat to them because they're not included in the update. It's just looking like, what do we need to keep from the original plan? But I think category 1 is going to provide plenty of discussion. And what I would hope is that we would be able to, some of us will have knowledge of some of these things, some of us will not. And we can talk about them as a group, and if we need to, ask Brian to help with some resources to better understand some of the topics. We can ask that as well. I'm not trying to create a reference library in your office of, but
I Googled a lot of stuff as I was reading.
I-
Spent many hours. What's this?
I do too. So,
What does this entail?
does that sound like a fair plan? And we will start with, if we can agree on the categories 1, 2, and 3 for our next meeting, and I will make sure that we have the documents combined so that we can go through them and go, this was in the original, this was in the update, this was in the final update, and are these things that are actionable from a village perspective? Are they reach goals that we want to keep in here? Or are they items that are outside the scope of what we can do as a village? And if we break it into those categories like that, it will be, I think, helpful for us to determine the final updated document.
So real quick to clarify that, we're talking about organizing 1, 2, and 3 based on the updated.
The original framework. So 1, 2, and 3 in the original framework, because if we go back to the last document, we lose some of the categories that were in the original and that we just talked about keeping as a guiding principle, or
Okay,
if we need to do
Okay.
4, because I think 2 and 3 don't have a lot of meat to them
in the original.
in the original. We can put another one in there and put that as the, energy's gonna take a while. But we can put a 4th one on the table, and if we get to it, we get to it, otherwise it will go into the next discussion.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
And
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No.
So would we be looking to move the goals or the action steps from procurement and green cleaning to the sections that are listed in the new document? Where feasible, like if we're like, yes, we want to do
Yes.
this, okay, and then we'll just move it into whatever appropriate
Well,
section it is in the
we're
new
gonna
document.
Put them so that there's a base framework, so we're all talking the same topics. And then whatever we can salvage, we will keep. Whatever we don't need, like, I don't think we need to try and encourage people to use natural gas. We can get rid of some of those items that the team definitely got rid of. We won't carry it through. I just think there's a combination of work that would be helpful to have. And maybe as the assignment, everybody can go back and make sure that you read 1, 2, and 3. And if you have any questions, like I still do about a couple items, whether it's in the old version or in the new version, Google it so that you know.
Oh, I did that plenty. I'm right with Tracy. I did a lot of Googling while I was reading.
So I'm asking for your agreement to go back, and we'll start at our next meeting with those segments.
Yes.
This was like, okay, how do we want to do this? How do we want to set up this framework? And my ultimate goal is that we have a document at the end of the day that we can say, okay, we have an updated sustainability plan. Let's approve this, and this is now the new sustainability working plan. And then the next step from there is to determine what are the next steps for that. Do we create a sustainability board? Do we not create a sustainability board, but put it into our regular cadence, that the sustainability plan gets reviewed prior to budget review? Because many of the things that go into the sustainability plan are items that may go into your capital planning. So, in the original plan, it said review this every year, and nobody reviewed it for
Oh, wow.
10 years. For 10 years. I mean, they might have, but they didn't do any formal reviews of it. So there has to be a decision made of what is the follow-on action from this. It's great to go through and review it and have it updated and have a group of people spend all this time trying to add more information to it. But at the end of the day, what's the board's decision going to be to have a long-term action plan for this? All putting out there all things for everybody to consider. Y'all look very.
I understand the format that we're going through.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So I know this is not as in-depth as maybe we would have hoped to get through tonight, but I think it helps if you have a plan so that you know the direction that you're going versus like, okay, are we looking at this one or this one or this one? And I want us to get to the end of this before we get to 2026. I would like us to try and get as much of this done by the end of the summer so that we can take some actions on it. Do I have everybody's support in doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
For me, it would make a lot of sense to me if we put, for my own brain organization, the original sustainability plan and the plan status update, if those were kind of together, like where it shows all the goals and the information that what's complete, what's not complete, like all the stuff that was in there, like all the cool stuff that we've done already. Seeing that in here as one document might be really helpful to see and where we need to move things around to. Does that make any sense? And then we
Add that
add this,
into that.
and it all becomes one wonderful.
I think that's what we're
Okay,
doing.
cool.
Okay,
Okay, so real quick,
yeah.
how easy is it to find this online?
The
It's
original
online.
one?
Yeah,
It's online. Easy,
I was thinking, yeah,
it's on our quick links, I think.
okay.
I have a question. Is the updated one online?
The proposed,
Yeah, the one that we're talking about now, the proposed one?
it's part of the agenda packet. No, it's not online because it's not something you
But
guys have
it-
reviewed or taken action on or anything else.
So I will take an action because I hear an action coming from this discussion to make sure, and I also saw it in here, to create a sustainability page so that we can start to talk about what we're doing and the history of this. So
Yep, I'm right with you, so it's sort of like people
that,
can see
and while
what
these are working documents, they are not finalized. This one was, the original one was approved in 2010. None of these other documents, these will all be working documents, and give an idea of the history of this and where we are in the process. Do you think that would be helpful?
Yes.
Tracy, would that be helpful?
Yes, as I said, it's going to lead to my next question. When I read the original, it was very much, you've got to get the community to buy in to be successful.
Sure.
You know, so that's why I was wondering, during the process, is there going to be public comment? Because it's only going to be as successful as our 5,000 residents choose to make it.
If they buy into it.
Right, and a lot of it is, and it's clearly said in the first one that you must make partners with your residents. They gotta believe in
Sure.
these, they gotta support these. So that's why I think that public feedback, as we go through this, would be very important.
Okay.
To kind of go off of what you're saying, there's a whole section on communication, and I believe that that's what the goal of that section is to communicate with our residents and to, even change logos and things like that to try to get that buy-in in all the different
Because
ways.
it's easy to say, well, everybody I talk to at the public market thinks that we can be so much more sustainable and it's a great idea. But then if you turn around and say, are you willing to have your property taxes raised 10% a year to finance some of these things? I mean, they really would have to know the cost directly related to some of these things. Because to implement many of these things, you're gonna have to generate some money, and the only way to generate that is through property tax. So I think there has to be, at some point during this process, some real conversations about
Well,
that too.
and I think that not everything has to be adopted.
Right.
There are some things that we're gonna go, well, that's not something we can afford to do as a village, whether it's in the scope or out of the scope.
Right.
But there are going to be things like the fact that the community composting program was put into place. And, reporting back like, okay, this is what, in terms of data measurement, this is where we are right now. It's something that we can continue. We haven't really publicized it in quite a while, and I think things start to fall off when people move to the community. I talk to people who move here, and I'm like, did you know we do compost? You can do composting? They're like, really? No. And so that would be something that it won't necessarily cost people, but we can utilize communication. There were a bunch of recommendations for looking for videos that talk about different things. While I think the document suggested that the village do some creation, I think that, talking about recycling or things like that, I think that there may be some organizations within Monroe County that we could utilize to help communicate those things. They may not require a lot of funding. That my goal is to find the things that require as little funding as possible, embrace those wholeheartedly.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And then the other parts are all gonna be a discussion. So,
I think we're completely on the same page.
Okay,
And I
that's
think
great.
the community buy-in is important, so they need to have comments. And now that this is on the agenda, people can read through it and listen and all of that. I mean,
Okay.
we have a highly engaged community with opinions.
go ahead, did you have something
I
else?
was just gonna say, the first thing that came up when I Googled Village of Fairport Sustainability Plan is the E-Code 360 with this document. So if people are looking for that, for the starting point for the discussion, or for things they can do for themselves individually and be more informed and do the Googling like Tracy and I did, that is a great way. You can inform yourself and come ready.
Okay. So I think that's about as far as we're gonna go tonight, unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to add. Tracy, you look like you have something to add.
Always.
gotcha.
When I read the original sustainability plan, it included mayor, deputy mayor, chair of FMC, the village manager, DPW, OSED, planning, a merchant, so it was, for what it is, it had a lot of these people on there. And then with the committee members now, it says, and you've worked with representatives of the village. I don't know who these people are.
They were all people who went through a process. They're members of the community. They all applied for a role, and they.
So they're all community members?
Yep, they all live in the village.
Okay, I just see that as kind of I don't know, it's may have been easier if we had more village people on there. As far as making recommendations for energy and things, it would have been helpful to have
They
the
were all
energy
people
person
who had a lot of experience in their workplace, that they applied for this because of their experiences.
Okay.
So,
But they're all residents.
they're all residents of the village. They all had some experience in different aspects of, I know when Matt when we put this group together, we sat through interviews, and then the group, as they formed, broke into subcommittees to work on specific topics that they had experiences around. So, all members of this village. And I
Okay,
think they
that
all
gives-
still live here. I don't think anybody's moved. So, anything else? Okay. When we get to,
Oh, yeah, I just agree. I think if we do 1 through 3, if we can get a stretch on maybe try to get in the sustainable building and development, that'd be
Is
great.
that 4?
That's 4.
Okay.
If we can get 4,
All
that'd be
right,
great.
so I will take that into my notes that we'll work on 1 through 4.
Like I said, I
and-
think 2 and 3, that should
And see
be
how it goes.
pretty easy to chew
Yeah,
on.
those are just really, like,
Like it through.
those are more value statements than necessarily action items at this point in time. So for next time, our assignment is 1 through 4.
So that'll be what, yeah, at the end of July,
Yep.
and then the next work session, we'll chew on the next 3 or 4, right?
Yeah, I want to try and get through this as
Yeah,
much as we can, where we can have chance to review it prior and then go through it and discuss what's under each heading. Okay.
Mayor, should we be looking then for something different from you than what we already have for
Yes.
1, 2, 3, and 4 before we start reviewing? Because you'll have some sort of like more of a merged
Yes.
document that we can use
My
to
goal
study,
is, yes,
study or, okay,
yes.
okay.
You will have it
Yes,
before the
okay.
meeting.
Yes.
And I will try and combine those, put those 3 or those 4 chapters together.
Then is it the goal to use this merge document that you're gonna provide for us, like, well in advance of that meeting to kind of prepare for?
hope so.
Okay,
I hope so.
Okay.
And I'm
Does-
not going to take anything that's in the final document that we received. I'm leaving all that content in there, and we'll go through and talk about it.
okay.
I'm not going to alter the content that
Right,
exists.
you're just gonna,
I'm going to try and put them together
make
into
it
one spot
easier
so that we can see,
to- okay.
where do we start?
yes,
Here's what we did.
yeah.
Here's
Let it
what,
cut and
Yeah,
paste.
I apologize. I just had a different impression, I guess. I thought that like, and this could be completely because I just misunderstood, that the sustainability board, this is the synthesis of it, and this was the recommendation, so to make our job easier. So I was kind
okay,
of excited.
the scope, the original scope of the work
Yeah.
was to take the original document, to go through and do the updates, what things are completed, and then add on
Which is what the goals are and
New-
the
new
goals.
content.
Yeah,
and suggestions. That was the original scope of the work. And they did a great job,
did
and
a
they
great
spent a
job.
lot of time, but I think it's hard for us to digest it in 3 different documents. And we also need to talk about, in those recommendations, again, there are going to be some things that we can work on and some things that are outside
okay, all right.
the
fair enough.
realm of what we can do.
Okay,
So my goal is to put those 4 chapters together so that we have something that we can really go through and discuss.
got it.
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll be ready.
All
1,
right.
2, 3, and maybe 4.
Hopefully 4 too. And I will get it to you as soon as I can.
Okay.
All right, so that takes care of item number 2, which would move us to item number 3, which is 58 South Main Street easement access. There is no action to take on this. I think there's just a quick update. Brian, do you want to give, or John, do you want to give an update on where we are with this? There were questions from some members about this access. And I think it falls within the scope of operations of the village market and the village manager working with the market manager, but
Yes.
go ahead.
So there was a question that was asked about the interaction between the new development at 58 South Main Street and the parking lot that was created, or just parking spaces that were created behind the 2 buildings, and how that interacts with the village's parking lot and the operation of the farmer's market, and by extension, other events that may be occurring within that parking lot. I provided an analysis to the board, but to summarize that analysis, the question was, how much oversight does the village have to limit the use of the access to the 10 parking spaces behind those 2 buildings for events that are occurring in the village parking lot? So to take a step back, all of this was discussed and contemplated at the time the development was going on. So in conjunction with the planning board, the village planner, the village manager and myself, we had looked at the site development plan. You know, how are they going to accommodate parking on that site, since they were losing the open space areas and the impervious surfaces that they had before to put the extra building on the site. So they had to relocate the parking to somewhere else. And so the only logical place consistent with our streetscape would be put it in the rear of the building. That's typically what you would do on a Village Main streetscape setting. So with those spaces, then the next question was, how are they going to access them? Because they can no longer get there through the site itself because of the second building. So the only feasible means of access was to get an easement from the village to go through our drive lanes off of Main Street to then come around and park in those spaces. And so at the time, we discussed very specifically, what do we do when there are events in the village's parking lot? Because obviously we were aware that there are times where that parking lot could be inaccessible or impeded significantly based on events that may be going on in that parking lot. And so the general language that was proposed by the developer, that we wouldn't materially interfere with their access to that lot, was obviously not going to work for the village given the events that we have there. So we crafted specific language to essentially eliminate any risk or liability on the part of the village that if that drive lane was ever impacted, obstructed, or blocked, period, that we would have no liability associated with that. They understood that there are events that happen throughout the year where we may shut down Main Street, right? Obviously, multiple times a year that'll happen, or that parking lot may be being utilized for other events like the farmer's market, where they simply may not have as feasible means of access as they usually would otherwise enjoy, you know, on a Wednesday afternoon. So the language that we put in the easement was designed to essentially eliminate any risk to the village that they may complain that they can't access those spots in the rear of the park, in the rear of the property. But all that said, the design of the property itself and the way that it was approved by the planning board necessitated some means of access to those 10 spots. So we couldn't eliminate or wholly control the ability of patrons or customers or employees to access those 10 spots in the rear. We could only eliminate our exposure to providing some assurance that they could get there. So the idea is that we have no liability, but we can't block necessarily their ability to access those spots unless, again, we shut down Main Street, where practically speaking, they no longer can get through there. So the easement was attempting to strike a balance between the property owner's ability to access the 10 spots and our ability to regulate the parking lot and any events that may be going on in the parking lot so that the two could coexist, hopefully.
Okay. So the question was, well, what's going to happen? So in Brian's role as the village manager, he's responsible for operations. He's responsible for the operations of the farmer's market, just as Julie, who is the farmer's market manager, is responsible for operations of the market. And I believe Brian and Julie, in their roles respectively, met with the folks from Starbucks. And do you want to just share any items from that discussion?
Sure. So obviously we took the concerns that some of the board members have to make sure, and I get it. You want to make sure they can coexist and be in a safe environment the best that you can. You have a lot of folks walking around on the market, but you also have these 7 or 10 spots directly behind the new development that may require some access. And so we kind of relayed that environment with them. They understand it completely, and they were receptive to what we were saying. And we're also saying, hey, we're in lieu of maybe giving in on not having those 7 or 8 spots so you can drive up to when you can park in the parking lot right next to it, and you can park in the lot across the street. You're not really losing anything, right? And it's for that 4 or 5 hour day on a Saturday. Granted, it's 26 Saturdays in a row, and I get it. For a coffee shop, you want to have that access, but you're also getting 1,000 to 2,000 people a day that we're providing a mall effect to, right at the boundary line of Starbucks, where they can get in there and access that, and you're not losing customers to that. You're actually bringing a lot of folks there that can choose whether they want to do business there or not. So they were going to talk about it. The people we talked to were very receptive of what's going on. They didn't commit to anything. I know some of them showed up this past weekend to go take a look at the site, see what was going on, see what the activity was, see what kind of what's the motions really look like in real time. They were going to speak with their district manager and have a conversation and get back to us. And we haven't had that conversation yet, but that was where we left it. And I think we'll find some balance. And if not, and we do have to provide that access, I think there's opportunities where we can shuffle and maneuver the market around a little bit to make sure that both can coexist and get in there. But I think just due to the confines of the place and so forth, I don't think it's going to be a huge thing. I don't know that yet because it hasn't happened yet. But I do believe we have the ability to mitigate some of that stuff and kind of manage our way through it. You know, in the end, while there's people there, every parking lot you walk in now has tons of people walking in the lot and people going down the lanes and that type of thing, and it manages to coexist because people know they're in a driving lane when they're walking, whether you're at the cannery lot or behind the lot here at Village Hall. But I completely understand if there's ability to mitigate or reduce those impacts or those occurrences from happening, we'll definitely try to do that within the confines of still have to have an access easement that they're allowed to do that. So I'll keep the board up to date on what we find out from Starbucks, what they're willing to do, how we work through that, and if there's a setup change or something that we have to do over there.
We work through stuff with businesses in the village all the time.
Yep.
I appreciate, Brian, you having that meeting, and I also appreciate you just clarifying the easement. You know, to be honest with you, the question really came up because the village board approved the easement. I mean, it was the work of this body that approved the easement to begin with. And when the discussion around that easement took place, the priority, or I guess like the highlighted event that was discussed was the farmer's market at the time of that meeting in 2023. I mean, because I clearly remember saying, oh, wow, this is a really smart decision to put this easement together. I can't imagine having, you know, traffic going, you know, the safety thing was a big concern of the village board in 2023. We were all, with the exception of Heidi, I don't think Heidi had been on the board at that point, but we were all here for that discussion. And so I just was surprised. I didn't know that there was sort of a change in possible use of, not the ability to use or not use. I guess it's kind of like least restricted kind of an idea. So I just didn't know that we had sort of like maybe changed our direction in how we would use that easement. And so that's really where the question sort of like started the seed. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. I thought we had this easement for that reason. And I think it's really important that we do strike that balance and make sure that we find and I don't for any minute think that you wouldn't do I'm not saying that you would have put safety on the line at all. I just
And I think over time, you know, we're going to be doing work over in that parking lot. And as time goes on, footprints are going to change. The market may shift in one direction or another to add spaces or so.
Yeah, I mean,
in the scope of things, I mean, there's flexibility within that parking lot to adjust things, and in another year or so, we're going to be working on that parking lot, and
I guess I was just more concerned, because we knew Starbucks was, starting to open in July 11th or
Sure.
July 10th is their sort of soft opening, I think is what and I knew that sort of, people develop habits. It might be harder to break those habits if that's not what we end up going with, and I mean, that's all this was. So I really appreciate you working with the Starbucks manager and
No problem.
Julie as well. Julie Melnick, she's great.
She is.
So she's perfect for that role.
We will do everything we can to mitigate those concerns.
And I
understand
think
what
it's
you're
smart
saying,
that
and-
we do have we do legally have the ability to control it
Yes.
if we need to. I think that was smart. So thank you, John, for making sure that we have that ability.
I went back and I've watched that meeting on the 10th of October in '23. I've watched it a few times and even rewatched it after Friday John sent a clarification letter. And up until then, maybe it was a rookie move, but the whole value and the whole concentration of that conversation we had as a board was to protect the farmer's market.
Farmers market.
And I absolutely, truly believed that this easement would allow us to not let them park and drive through the public market.
That was my
I
understanding.
mean, I voted in support of it because, yes, I know it's landlocked, but what we actually did is we dedicated public land for their exclusive use during
No,
the
we
farmer's
didn't.
market.
No.
So they're not driving on,
They're
the
on their,
public land.
they're on their property.
but they're
That
not if you look at the map. Their property ends at the end of their parking space. So those drive lanes we're talking about is public space. And unless we can't control that and they can drive on our public space to access their private space. Again, as I said, it's still, I don't get it. It wasn't what I thought it was. Maybe a rookie move, but I mean, festivals and limits. When you go back to the tape and you really listen to it, I thought it was, we're all on the same page protecting the public market, and public safety is our first concern. And I voted for it to support that they weren't going to use it on a Saturday. So maybe Emily had that same understanding.
That was what I thought. So that's, again, what I had said just earlier was that I was just surprised that we were potentially going in a different direction with this, the use of the easement. And, you know, when you go to the public, I was at the public market on Saturday, we do block off that. I mean, you can turn in off of Main Street, but you can't go far enough to actually make that left-hand turn. The way that we have it, the way that we
had it
put those
before.
barriers today, before, what's that?
Yeah, you'll be able to turn in there now, where we have the barricades a little further north or west now, but
Okay.
yeah. But before, you're correct,
Right, like
before that was
on
correct.
Saturday.
Yep.
Well, I was just out there looking, and I was like, oh, right now, this Saturday, the barriers are in a position where a car could not make that left-hand turn. So, you know, if we wanted to use that easement to keep that habit or that routine going, we certainly have the legal right to do that.
So can we? I guess I'm still
Or no.
confused. Can we block off? Because even looking at your picture and your drawing, it's like we're giving them public land. Their land property ends at the end of their parking spot.
So they have a non-exclusive,
Yeah.
so we didn't grant them exclusivity over anything on village property. They have a non-exclusive right, as any member of the public would have, to traverse through that drive lane to make a left turn. I mean, the idea being that if the village is not shutting down some portion of that parking lot, then the public is allowed to access whatever areas we deem advisable under the circumstances.
But, so we can block this off according to this lease agreement and not ask for permission of the manager's boss will give us permission. Does the easement as it sits right now that we agreed to would allow us to block
That's right.
off their access to our public land to get to their private land?
There is nothing prohibiting the village from blocking some or all of that parking lot for use by anybody that goes in that parking lot, whether it's Starbucks, Bonnie and Clyde, or any other business within the plaza. But that said, the intent behind it was to work collaboratively to determine whether or not there's a need to block off that drive lane for whatever reason. And I think operationally, that's the discussions that are being had to ensure that,
Sure.
is there a reason why it needs to be blocked? Is it a safety concern or otherwise with respect to the operation of the market, just as it would be for other portions of that parking lot, right, that are still open?
So if we were to use it to
That-
the
in that-
fullest
in that
extent,
manner.
we could technically, is what you're saying. But because we want to balance
I think
that
there's a
site
key word
was-
that John said that's called collaborative. We are working together with the business to find a solution that will meet people's needs. And
I do understand that. I'm just asking I just want to know what our rights as a village are.
We have complete control over that parking lot,
Okay, thank you. I
If and when we
too
choose to
completely-
exercise that, we can do that.
just as we did with Canal Days.
Right,
It'd be
okay.
the same concept. If we shut down that drive lane for a particular reason, the language we put in there was intended specifically to ensure that we do not have exposure. Now, Starbucks has an I want to say Starbucks, 58 South Main Street. I don't want to limit it just to the Starbucks because there are 2 buildings on that site. There is an expectation because of the redevelopment of the site in order to have access to parking, because it was intended, the planning board did intend to allow for access to parking spaces while one or both of those businesses are operating, as the case may be. So, I mean, it wasn't intended that we are gonna have, I wanna say, complete control to block it off 24/7, 365, right? That wasn't the intention behind it. But if we determine there's an event going on or something is happening in that parking lot, we do have the control over our space. I mean, that was very specifically negotiated, but we did intend to have a collaborative understanding that we would work to see, to ensure that perhaps they could coexist, any events that are going on in that parking lot. That was, part of the impetus behind the negotiation.
So in other words, what you're doing is you're, as much legally as you can frame out, building in gray area for flexibility.
Yes, because if we eliminated the ability to use those parking spaces completely, then the developer would have had an issue moving forward with the project because they were not going to have any parking, guaranteed parking. Right?
I get it. I understand
We went
it.
as far as we could go in the negotiation to put the parking in place so that it was accessible for the vast majority of the year, understanding that we still have control over our parking lot, because if we want to shut it down for a festival or any other reason, we have considerable amount of discretion there.
I guess the farmer's market, because the language says events or festivals, and the farmer's market was in the discussion, and I see that as an event. It just happens to be a reoccurring one for 26 weeks.
Oh,
So
it was
I-
discussed specifically. We had
Right.
that in mind when we were negotiating this, absolutely, sure.
So what I'm hearing is what you understood is correct.
Yes.
And that's what we've
That
done.
makes me feel good that what
And-
I understood in 2023 is what actually came to fruition. And so it then,
So it seems like there was a lot of fear over a misunderstanding.
well, no, because there
No.
was discussion that we wouldn't then use the easement to block off those spots
But
during the.
but we just established that we have the ability to do that. And that's what we thought we were agreeing to, and that's what we got. So,
But there
I
was
mean, I wanna
discussion
say,
that we were
like-
not going to do that. That's where my fear
I
came
don't know
on.
where that discussion came from, because it was the issues that were brought up in the emails that brought us to this. And I'm not sure where the problem came from originally, and we don't really seem to have a problem because we've just verified that the things that you're asking about are actually true. We're working to collaborate with the business owner to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that it's gonna go appropriately.
We're working to find a balance. So there was still discussion about whether or not we were going to block the lanes off or not. I think we're still in that same discussion, are we not?
no, I
Yes.
think we've established that we have the ability to block that off, which is what we thought we were getting.
Yes.
And
But we're not going to do it.
No, we
don't-
said,
So
we know we said
haven't
we
been- but
can.
We haven't been told whether or not we're going to do that.
Well, and
That's what I want to know. What are we doing? How are we using this easement? That's all I'm asking here.
right, and so
I'm not
what,
trying to be difficult. I would like to know how we're going to use the easement, and when we have that answer, could we just be, that can be communicated?
so I,
Thank you.
so I think what we've established is we have the ability to use it.
But we're
We will
not
use
going
it when,
to.
but hold on a minute. We have not said that we're not going to use it. I don't think anybody has said that we're not going to use that in this discussion. So I'm a little confused where that came from. It sounds like we, back in 2023, said this is what we're interested in. And it sounds like that's what we got.
Yeah.
And so we have the ability to close it down. It sounds like right now, that's the plan. It may change, and that's what we built into the legal agreement, the ability to do that. And then if in the future we decide something else is changing about the farmer's market where we no longer need to do that, we don't have to go back and renegotiate that agreement. That flexibility is built in there so that we can ebb and flow as we need.
Yes, I understand that.
As do I. So I guess we'll just wait and see what the district managers come back with, and then we'll take it to the
I think
next
there's a
step.
very
I just-
cordial discussion that's happening, right?
So, to answer Trustee Mishler's question, and I think her concern is,
It was all safety, all along.
I get it.
It's,
so let me just say, so I'm clear on the direction you guys want, right? Okay.
thank you.
My intent was to have this coexist and see if we can work it out, which I believe we can. If the board would like to see us try to work that out, I'll continue to proceed as planned. If the board right now says, hey, shut it down, and I'll notify Starbucks, please let me know that right now, if that's the intent before we try it.
I don't think,
I just want to make sure I'm getting you what you want and what everybody wants, so I just need to know if that's what the desire is. Because if the legal right is there, I remember having this conversation with the developer a little bit, and I think it's going to cause some things, but regardless of that, if our corp counsel believes that we have the authority to do that, I don't think the intent during this conversation was to shut it down as a coffee shop, which lives and breathes on a Saturday morning for 26 weeks. But if that's the desire of the board, I'll exercise that right in that clause, and we'll do that, and we'll keep it shut off the way it currently is. So
I will say
is
that
there-
it was my desire in 2023 when I voted to approve that easement, that was my desire.
Okay.
And from the discussion that we've had tonight, it seems like it was other board members' desire to also exercise that easement for that reason.
That's what I thought I
The-
was
the
voting
notes-
for.
Well, real quick,
So-
the easement is their easement on our property, not our easement on their property.
Yes.
Correct.
Right,
And
so we don't exercise an
I
easement.
think from my perspective, I would like you to continue to try and have a collaborative conversation versus saying, okay, we're putting barriers up, don't plan on parking here. That's not how you work together with businesses in your community. And that feels like what I'm hearing
Nope, not at all.
from this end right here. And what I suggest is that we allow Brian to do his job and to work together with this business owner to find a collaborative solution that is going to suit the needs of public safety, the farmers market, and making sure that we're following whatever we've agreed upon on an easement.
I think sometimes you have to prioritize things. So are we going to prioritize our Starbucks business, or are we going to prioritize the safety of our residents in the farmers market, this small farmers market?
I'm not certain that
So,
there's,
but for you to paint that my priority is to not be collaborative with businesses is unfair. That is not what I'm trying to do. I'm
I
saying,
actually want us to allow our village manager to do his job while we are responsible for policy. He's responsible for enabling operations. And we've gone through this multiple times. And I really think we're at a point where we should let the people that we employ to do these jobs manage them. We've heard multiple times about this concern about safety, and I don't have any doubts that Brian will make sure that it's a safe environment.
I don't doubt that either, but we are a village board elected by our constituents, and we are also here to guide our village manager in making the decisions that we as a village board would like him to make. And if we as a village board would like him to use the easement in the way that we agreed upon in 2023,
I
then
haven't
we need
heard
to
that,
share,
I
we need
haven't
to
heard
share
that we're
that
not.
with him.
I have not heard that we're not. And I think that we've spent a lot of time on a topic that really doesn't need this much discussion at a work session meeting. We've gotten the actual agreement described. Brian has said he's going to work together collaboratively with the owners of the property. I think that that's the appropriate step at this point in time, and allow him to do,
And
allow
Brian, am I
him to
right
do
that
his
when
job.
The conversation that you had with the Starbucks manager was left open, and she was going to reach out to her regional manager to get permission from the regional manager to do this, correct? Okay, I think that's great. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
But I also understand that for right now, why don't we wait and see what the district manager comes back at? And then we'll take next steps or discussion at that point.
All right, I'm going to end this discussion because I think we've gotten to the point where there's nothing further to cover here. So I'm going to move on to the next item, which
Can I,
is,
Can I just say a little something? before you
sure, go right ahead.
I do very much appreciate Trustee Mishler and Trustee Briggs's viewpoint on this. I do fully support the work that Village Manager White and the Farmers Market Manager are doing to have a positive relationship, because it does not seem like that chunk of the parking lot is much different in terms of safety from the rest of the parking lot, where there are people milling around all over the parking lot the entire morning. Everyone knows there's cars. I think that having those conversations with the Starbucks manager and their staff is the right thing to do for a positive relationship within the village. And I do not feel that we need to just go out and shut down something. We need to let it work itself out and have a conversation and see where it goes. That's it.
Anything else? Okay. I'm going to move on to, we have item 2 and item on the supplemental agenda, or the amendments to the agenda, and item 6, which I will get to those in just a moment. Before that, under upcoming meetings, we are not conducting the village board meeting on July 14th. There will be a special meeting that will be scheduled on the 10th or the 11th, so that we can get a quorum of the board together to do the business of the village that's needed for mid-month. And Megan will make sure that that's advertised, as well as Brian. And I don't have the specific time, but we will figure something out, and it will be advertised, and everybody will be notified when that meeting occurs, and it would be here at Village Hall. The next Village Board work session will be Monday, July 28th at 6 p.m. Any missing pieces of mid-month work that we need to get accomplished in terms of approvals of whether it's healthcare or that will all go on that agenda. So we'll make sure that everything gets covered. And then on that agenda, we will also begin the next section of work on the sustainability plan and anything else that comes up for that as well.
Mayor, can I ask?
Sure.
The village board meeting is the time where the public can comment. Can we just add a public comment section to the work session on the 28th?
I don't see why not. I'm sure we
Right.
can.
It's over a month, and our people
we
need
can
to
do
talk.
that. We can do that at the beginning and
Yeah.
allow for public comment at that.
Thank you for that
No problem.
consideration.
So we'll make sure that that's on that agenda. Thanks. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get us into executive session. And we will go to executive session, and then we will come back out and end the meeting, but the meeting will end in terms of online presence right now. And should I just combine these two into one statement? I don't know if there's separate sections. All right, so a motion by the village, can I have a motion by the village board to enter executive session to discuss proposed pending or current litigation and also collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law?
So moved.
By trustee Boyka,
Second.
by trustee Briggs. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? So we will enter executive session at 7:30, and we'll return to adjourn the meeting.